And we are live. This is John, and this is AA Beyond Belief, the podcast. This is a podcast by, for, and about people who have found a secular path to sobriety in Alcoholics Anonymous. If there is anybody here for the first time, and it looks like we only have one person out there. Now there's two people out there now. But if there's anyone here for the first time, what we're doing here, this is a live stream that we do every Friday night. And basically, all that's involved is we have a topic, and my co-host Angela here and I will discuss it for about 20 minutes or so. Then we will open up the phones. This is totally a participatory podcast, so that you can participate either by calling in to our toll-free number or by commenting in the chat on Facebook and YouTube. But I thought before we get into today's topic, why don't we check in with Angela over there in Boise, Idaho. How you doing, Angela?
I'm doing well. How about you?
Not bad. What's new over there? Has your group started meeting in person yet? I bet it not.
No, it has not. And as far as I know, we're taking it month by month and checking in with the Unitarian Fellowship. That's where we meet at, and they're taking a pretty conservative, view of when they're going to reopen their building. So we're not really expecting that we'll get in before the first of the new year, but again, we go month by month and see what's happening. So no, our group does not. We are still doing the 2 meetings a week though, and those are going well, and still enjoying that. Other than that, not too much new and exciting over here. Okay. I understand that you had the week off, so you were on vacation.
I did, and it's gone by pretty fast, but I still have Monday off too. And I tell you, I really did need it. But it's amazing how I can stay busy, even without having to work. I got a lot done though. I edited some podcast episodes, and I got caught up on the AA Beyond Belief thing. And Joe, I think there's some sort of a problem with the Facebook feature on StreamYard. So that might be the situation where we don't have as many people listening. Yeah. I saw some sort of an error message that StreamYard mentioned that there was some kind of a technical problem with Facebook, but they said that everything's supposed to work, but that you just get this message. Anyway, that there probably is a problem with it, Joe. So
sorry about that.
So I did have the week off, and I got caught up on a few things, and I'm just fine, just everything's going fine here. So
cool. On the bottom of our little StreamYard thing next to Leave Studio, it has the words "having issues?" ? And I just think that's hilarious. Oh, yeah. So it's like, well, yes, StreamYard, I am. Will you talk to me about it? We're talking about listening. Anyway.
Yeah. Well, I guess I do have some news to report.
Okay.
Last week, I mentioned something about the Higher Palooza 3, and I didn't have any information to give you on that. So I put a link out there in the YouTube chat, but for their website. But basically, it's the Cleveland Freethinkers group. They're going to be hosting Higher Palooza 3 on Sunday, September the 20th. It's at 10 o'clock a.m. Eastern. And they're going to have 3 speakers, Guy P. from Denver, Colorado, Ali R. from London, England, and Sally P. from Cleveland, Ohio. And you can find more information about Higher Palooza 3 at their website, ftcleveland.com. That's freethinkerscleveland.com, ftcleveland.com. So there's that. And that should be pretty good. I did actually attend the first one that they had, and I didn't even realize they had a second one already. So this is their third one. Also, I'm just going to put this out there. The Secular AA International Conference of Secular AA Organization, they desperately need a webmaster. And I've reached out to one person. I haven't heard back, and I cannot do this. And we desperately need somebody. So if you have skills in that area, please send an email to seculara@gmail.com. Even if you can't do it yourself, if you know somebody, or even if you can help out just for a little bit, it would be very helpful, because we need to get that thing ready. when we had a really clumsy exchange of webmasters from one to none, and everything that we had prior to is gone. So we need to rebuild everything from scratch, and it's a ton of work. So definitely, if you're interested in helping out, please send an email to seculara@gmail.com. And what I'll do, I answer that email address, but I'm hoping to get someone else to do that. But I'm gonna forward your email on to to Sam, who's the chair of the board, and he'll get in touch with you and get you going on that. So please consider doing that. And then also we mentioned something about streaming on Saturday. We will be doing that. It's not going to be a weekly thing though. So we'll announce that ahead of time, and we'll do that like once a month. So let's look at doing another one on Saturday next month. So we'll be doing that in October. October also, by the way, on October the 4th, this is hard to believe, but that will mark the 5th anniversary for AA Beyond Belief. Unbelievable.
Wow.
Yeah, it was on October the 4th that we posted our first article. And I thought it was actually in September, because I noticed that the first podcast that we posted was in September. And that's true. It did go out in September, but nobody listened to it until October the 4th when it was on the website, because nobody knew it existed. So anyway, so October the 4th is the day. And Angela and I will do a special episode just to acknowledge that. And I don't know, it'd be fun to kind of go over the history of how it all came to be, how it's impacted my life personally, and give me an opportunity to thank all the people who have helped make it possible. So I'm kind of looking forward to that. It's amazing though how time goes by.
Yeah. Are you going to use lots of the party noises and things that you
Yeah,
have set
we'll
up?
make it fun.
Woo! Yeah,
Absolutely.
sounds good.
Oh, how nice for somebody from Facebook. He listens to the podcast on his way to work. How cool. That's so
Aw,
nice. You know, I used
yeah.
to do the same thing actually. I don't drive
You
to work
listened
anymore.
to the
I did. I
podcast
listened
on
to
your
our
way to work?
podcast on the way to work.
Wow.
Yeah. And you know, it's actually kind of nice, because if I did an hour podcast, I could hear about half of it on the way to work, and then I could get the rest of it on the way back from work. And it's like the way
Nice.
back from work used to always take a lot longer.
Yeah,
You know, that seems like ancient history when I used to drive back and forth to work.
right.
Man, those days. And yeah, I don't know if that's ever going to come back for me for a long time. My company seems to be okay with everybody working from home pretty much indefinitely. It seems to be working out for the company. So
Yeah, I know that my sister, before the pandemic, there was just one team for the company she worked for that worked from home, and she was on that team. And then the pandemic hit, and so their team was part of the leadership of training everybody else to be able to work from home. And so then I just read. I haven't even talked to my sister about it, but I read in our local news that that they're not coming back. That the
yeah,
company is not coming back to their major building downtown, and they're just 70% of their workforce is able to do their work from home, and so
yeah.
they're downsizing the facility that they need. So
I think there's going to be a lot of companies doing that. Now, this is totally not recovery related, I guess.
yeah, this isn't just
It is kind of interesting, but I bet a lot of companies are going to do that. And what are we going to do with all this real estate? I don't know.
yeah.
Okay. So back to Alcoholics Anonymous and the subject at hand, which is all about listening.
What?
Listen, yeah. What?
I had to do it. I had to do it for Josie. I don't know.
Yeah. So anyway, so today this topic was actually inspired by an article that we posted back in April of 2017, and it was written by Galen T. Galen does a lot of work for AA Beyond Belief. He's like one of our editors. Him and PJ
Mhm.
do the editing. Anyway, he wrote this. He's an excellent writer, and in the essay, he writes about the importance of listening to people that we're helping, that we're working with in AA, whether it be someone that you sponsor, whether it be somebody who's new at a meeting,
Mhm.
you know. And he wrote in his essay, which I find true for me too, that what he found, like when he was sponsoring people, is they didn't really want him to fix their problem.
Mhm.
They just wanted to be heard and listened to. And in being listened to, they were able to think through and work through their own problem. And I think that's what AA meetings do for me, quite frankly.
Yeah.
When I'm sharing in an AA meeting, it's not so important for me to get feedback like you would like a group therapy or something,
Mhm.
but it's just important for me to get it out and have other people hear me.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking about it too when I read the article was the sharing in meetings that generally we're supposed to be sharing our experience, strength, and hope, but
Yeah.
sharing from our experience. And so when somebody does present a topic or a problem or issue that they're having, if it's that kind of a meeting where somebody just presents a topic, then we, generally don't launch into what we think they should do about that issue. We talk about, so like one of the recent ones for our group is why are you in AA? Like why do you continue to go to meetings, and what's important about it to you? And so yeah, somebody was kind of just questioning that, why do I go, and how important is it to me? And they're somewhat newer in sobriety, and so so we all shared on why we are members of Alcoholics Anonymous, what we get out of it, and if that has had changed. For me it has, but I really like that way of sharing because it can offer hope, that particularly if it's a problem like I have to find another place to live immediately. My roommates started drinking crazily, or things like that, which were most of my stories and in early recovery. And people would share about how they experienced something similar and got through it, without going back out or drinking, or causing additional problems and stuff. So I really like that, and I, like you said, and I think the article said it seems different than in other therapies, and that's been brought up in our group too, because we have members that are very active in the VA as well, and in the VA substance use disorder treatment, they call each other on stuff, and so we've had to talk about the difference, because that's not really something that we do in our meetings. I mean, maybe they do in other meetings, but particularly in the area that I'm in AA, it's usually a topic discussion, and
Right.
we just share what our experience is with whatever topic, and yeah, so that the listening, I think also one thing that I love about meetings, or at least the in-person meetings when we had them, was that it was like the one time during the day when everybody had their phones off, at least
Right.
in our meeting. I
Yep.
mean, I know there are some meetings where they're still going off with their phones, but in our meeting it was pretty obvious that phones needed to be down. And so so people were actively listening to each other, or thinking about what they're going to say, but still it gave the impression, so that not only you felt like you were being heard. So and I think that that's something that AA has to offer, that other people might not be getting in
Yeah,
their
it's
life.
unique to AA, and I think in a way where, because I've been in group therapy where, you go around the room and the therapist kind of facilitates a conversation, and
Mm-hmm.
the therapist wanted us to interact with each other, and
Mm-hmm.
so it was a completely different thing than in AA where you just kind of go around, everybody has their say,
Mm-hmm.
for 2 or 3 minutes. I'm telling you, like you've never been to an AA meeting.
Yeah, tell me about it. So what happens in an AA meeting?
But there's none of that, the cross. I know is crosstalk sometimes, but I have been to meetings, and I know we've all been to meetings like this where somebody does
Mhm.
try. Like sometimes it'll happen like this. Someone will come to the meeting and they will just ask for advice, and then they start getting it.
Mhm.
And those I kind of cringe at those meetings, because it's like, no, 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 no. I really don't want to hear a bunch of people trying to fix this person. And
Yeah.
when I was drinking, And I think that other people have felt the same thing. When I was drinking at the worst of my drinking, I was a younger person. I was always fucked up. I was always having some kind of crazy problem, and other people had to sit around and figure out what to do with me, how to fix
Mhm.
me. And so I hate that, and so I think that was one positive thing for me in AA, is that nobody was trying to fix me. you know I was just another person of many who have the same problem, and that was huge. Tyler says the breaking out of isolation was huge, and it was. That's what it was for me too, was that breaking out of isolation, listening to other people, having other people listen to me, you know so it is just a huge thing. It's a strength of AA, I think, to have that lack of crosstalk for the most part, anyway.
Right. Yeah. And in doing the steps, like I mean, the way that I went through them, there's talking and sharing, even up through step 5. But for some people, the real sharing doesn't happen until step 5. But that's one of the things that I think is, new and helpful for people newer in recovery, is when they, write all this stuff down, and then they sit down and they share it with somebody, and the person just listens,
Yes,
and then if there's some stuff that, they think the person might consider differently, they share that. But in general, it's just, you listen and witness what their experience is, and then often normalize it, like,
that's right.
yeah, I remember when I did that,
Yep.
or something like that. And so this huge thing, well, for me, there was a few things in there that seemed very huge and that I was just cringing at sharing with somebody, was not that big of a deal anymore. And so that was very, very freeing.
Yeah.
and
Joe is
and
mentioning just that in
yeah,
the comment, if you see that. Yeah.
yeah, listening on a deeper level and stuff. So yeah, hearing that, and then learning to do that as a sponsor. And that was one of my sponsor's main things to me about sponsoring, is she said, you just have to see the person for who they are and love them until they can love themselves, and that's really it. So
Well, I've been on the receiving end of fifth steps, and also on the giving end, of course. And both times, I guess I learned from the person who heard my fifth step, and he just listened to me. And I think that the only time he would ever talk or share something from his own life would be if I was stuck. And he
mhm.
would sense that there was something I didn't really want to talk about, or was difficult for me to talk about. And he was really good about making me comfortable so that I could get that out, because I did think it was important to get that stuff out. And
Mhm.
when I did, and he would ultimately share something with me similar that he had either thought or felt or did,
Mhm.
and it did feel like, oh wow, I'm not a freak of nature, I'm just a human being like this guy is.
Right.
And I did the same thing. I just basically listened to the person, and
Mhm.
only if they were stuck, only if it felt like it was the right thing to do, would I ever say anything at all.
Yeah, I think, and I don't know if it's just a somewhat of a gendered thing, but I know that the majority of the fifth steps that I've listened to have involved abuse of some sort that the woman has
Yeah.
undergone. And so always part of that is to reflect in a way, so that they understand that they didn't have a part in that. Because I have, and I've mentioned it before, there are people in the recovery in this area, and then I've heard, via Zoom too, who have had sponsors that, told them they had a part. Like, one of them did leave the rooms because her sponsor told her that, her part in her sexual assault was how she dressed. And
God, I
it
can't.
seems like in this day and age that would not be a thing, but it is a thing. And
Yep.
and so that's why, um, I think a little differently, at least the way that I do it, is that if there's something in there, then I take, efforts to, let them know that they didn't have a part. And if I haven't already suggested that they get additional treatment, then we talk about that at that time as well.
Yeah, I think you're right that it probably is much more common among women in recovery than men. Although I have known men who also were abuse survivors, and that's something to really think about. And I guess there's also time for me too to recognize what I might not be qualified to hear.
Right.
I have not yet had anything like that, but yeah. But that's crazy that that someone would say that they had a part in something like that. But I know it happens. I've heard it from other people several times.
Right. Yeah. And so I think it's something important for us to talk about, or at least to acknowledge that it happens, and that anybody who listens to our podcast, that's not something that I would say the majority of responsible people in AA would be doing. And so, definitely seek out other people in AA if you've had that experience, or a therapist to talk about that.
Jackie's comment early on, it felt mind blowing to me that people would share things, and it was almost like they were in my head or in my gut.
All right.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about, Jackie. I've certainly have had that experience. Now, over the last few years, I'd say actually over the last 5 years in particular, and I could go back even further, really since I've been married, I have become more aware of how poor a listener I really am. Now, I can't tell you how often I've had conversations with my wife, and she says to me, "You're not listening." And I said, "What'd you say? What'd you say?" It's like, and it's like, she's right. I'm sitting there in the room with her, and she's talking, and it's like the Charlie Brown cartoon when the teacher's talking or something. I don't know, nothing's seeping in, and it's like I'm having a conversation, I'm not picking it up. And then I also noticed that during podcasts, like if I'm interviewing somebody and I think I'm listening to them, but then later on when I go back and edit the podcast, and I really have to listen closely when I'm doing that editing, and I notice that I don't pick up on something like really important that they said, or or I don't ask a follow-up question or go deeper into it, because it just didn't seep into me. It wasn't. I was probably worried about, did I hit the record button, or some other stupid thing like that, but I wasn't focusing on what the person said. So between my wife and the podcast, I really started becoming more aware that, what, this is something I really am not that great at, and I really need to get better at. And just having that awareness did help me. And like when I really am focusing on it, then I can see that, okay, this is something that is truly a skill to be developed. It's not something that you can just assume that you do naturally because you're a human.
Right.
And I actually read a little bit. I did a little bit of research, nothing big, but just Googled a few things. And about for the average person and any human being, you only remember about 25 to 50% of what's being said to you when you're in a conversation.
Okay.
So anyway, that's just the way we are.
It makes sense to me. I would say maybe 10% on mine, but
really?
No, I don't know. It depends on what it is, and the depth of conversation, and
that's true.
That kind of thing. My mind divides things
up.
up.
Gave was like if you get directions, like if somebody is giving you directions, you're only going to pick up like maybe half of it. And that's kind of true. I mean, if you you don't have to get directions from people anymore, but I don't know, Angela, if you're old enough to remember when you were driving and you had to stop and ask somebody for directions, and it's like, it was crazy because fuck, what they say? I can't remember. Now you just use your phone.
Okay. Yeah, I've heard of that. Is that when you had to use your feet to move the vehicle and stuff? So.
We had road maps. We had paper maps. We had to roll them. We had anyway. Those were different days. So, what do we really expect? Sponsors are not professionals, inbound and trained by ethical codes. They're going to bring all their wacky ideas. That's true. That's just the thing. Sponsors are just people like us and people in recovery like us.
Mhm.
And, we do have to be kind of careful, I guess, about, getting the right sponsor. I've been pretty lucky, I suppose. I had some sponsors that were, oh, I mean, I've gotten some bad advice from sponsors and so forth. But for the most part, I've been pretty lucky, I guess.
Yeah, I guess what I'm thinking from that comment, or what comes up for me, is that yeah, expectations are one thing, but just the traditions that we pass on, not the literal traditions, but the tradition of sponsoring and things. If we want to continue to have that as part of AA, is that it's something that we do need to acknowledge that, well, one, that sponsors aren't professionals, but these different difficulties that people have, either predatory things, or the not being empathetic to somebody who has been through an abusive situation, that if we talk about those, then that does create some sort of a norm on what sponsors do or do not do, or what they should or should not be doing or saying. And then that not only helps newcomers, that if they run into a situation where a sponsor is being overbearing, or stepping in too much or something like that, then they'll be able to hopefully feel like they can talk to somebody else about it and get another perspective. But then it also helps people who, as they're starting to sponsor, have a little bit more guidance on what they some, I don't know, guidance and boundaries on what to do. Because I don't know about you, but my first time sponsoring, I was terrified. And so it helped me when other people in the rooms talked about sponsoring, and how they handled things, and what they did or didn't do, and what they felt sponsors were supposed to do and not do. So yeah, that's my thought on that, is that I think most of us know that they're not professional, but we're still doing this as part of AA, and so setting some sort of standards and tradition verbally is one way to do it.
Yeah.
I think we discussed recently the peer recovery aspect that is becoming much more prevalent in the US, at least, and that at least in those situations, those people are somewhat trained
They are.
in different things, and
Yep.
have a better idea of when they need to direct somebody to someone with more experience and stuff.
Yep. Recovery coaches, they go through training, and then they before they get certified by the state, and every state's different, but before they get certified, they have to do so many hours of actual field work. And so it is something that's kind of regulated, and they are, they do have some sort of a skill set, I guess, that they've been trained to do that sort of work. And it's really interesting. It's a great concept. I think it puts more people out there, that can actually help people. So
yeah,
that's
I
a
think
good
it's
thing.
great. Yeah.
So,
And Joe's thing on directions. Yeah. I don't do well with and it's funny because my work has to do with GPS,
oh,
but in general, I'm much more of okay, you go down to the McDonald's, and take a left, and then you go past the Target, and it's yeah, that kind of a thing, rather than feet or anything else. So anyway,
growing up,
back to listening.
I'm just remembering, and we have pictures of this, but growing up, okay, so back in the 70s, I lived in Europe as a kid, and my father was in the military, and in the army, you'd get a lot of time off work, you could go travel. So it seems like we'd take like a summer off work, and we'd travel in Europe in a car, and we were pulling a little trailer behind us. And more often than not, there's a picture of my dad with a map trying to figure out where the hell we are. It's kind of funny. But I think
Nice.
those are funny days. And I remember my dad often getting lost. And then and it was even funnier when my grandmother was around, and my grandmother used to give my dad such a hard time for getting lost all the time. But of course, that wouldn't happen anymore.
Yeah.
So when I was doing my research, and it took like not a whole lot of time, but anyway, when I was Googling on listening, so I came up with some different types of listening. And I'm sure that there are more, but active listening, empathetic listening, and what's the other one? Active listening, empathetic listening. Oh my goodness. Oh, mindful listening. And so I went to this site. It's called mindtools.com, which is really kind of a business site, but it had
Mhm.
really good stuff there about listening. And there's a difference between active listening, mindful listening, and empathetic listening. And probably the empathetic listening is what we do the most in AA, where
Mhm.
we are actually kind of actually we're the mirror for the person, I guess, is how they
Right.
describe it,
Mhm.
if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah. I would agree.
Yeah.
Um, I did want to touch on the person in the chat that mentioned having a sponsee that committed suicide, and I'm sorry to hear that. That yeah, definitely is one of the difficulties in AA, or not difficulties, but it's one of the realities that we have of when we're trying to, be of service and help somebody, and it's beyond what we
Yeah.
can do. And I have had
Oh my
sponsees that
God, I
have
see the
been,
comment now from Soul
yeah,
Listening. I'm sorry, I
yeah,
missed that. Oh my God.
yeah,
I
where
I had that experience. I had a sponsee who, I mean, you couldn't have proved it was a suicide, but I was pretty sure it was. He just ran his car at a very high speed into a tree.
Mhm.
For anyway, and I went to his funeral, and it was just awful, and I spoke to his family. Because actually, I got a call from his I remember that I got a call from his father telling me what happened, and,
Mm.
wow, yeah, it's tough. It is really, 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 really difficult.
Yeah.
Anytime suicide just by itself, anytime you lose someone that you love or know from suicide, I mean, I've experienced it firsthand from my mother's death,
Mhm.
and, I mean, the first thing that I did as a kid, and I think our entire family did that, is you looked back in hindsight, and it was like, how could I not have seen how could I have not seen all the warning signs, because, she was doing all the classical things a person would do before they commit suicide, but
Mhm.
we weren't recognizing that at all, and
Yeah.
so I think it's natural that I know I did, and the rest of my family took the blame for her death to a certain extent, felt a lot of guilt over it. So I think that that applies almost any time that you know someone who commits suicide. It's like you always say to yourself, maybe you might say to yourself, "Oh God, if I only could have done this or that," And honestly, there's nothing. It's just I consider it like you know an illness, and that's just the
Mhm.
ultimate outcome of the illness. You know.
Yeah, yeah, and I've had sponsees who have been suicidal, and what I generally do is call in my sponsor or another woman who has more experience than I do, so that we can talk together with the person so that they can feel part of the community, because there's more than one of us, and it helps, it helped me to not feel like I was responsible to keep this person alive, and and it did help that person feel loved, and I'm not saying that that's the way to handle everything, but in my case, my experience was that that's what we did, and I know during this pandemic that there have been quite a few people that have been lost
Mm,
to overdose or suicide, and several women from one of the groups that I attend, who one of them attempted suicide and ended up in the ICU for about a week and a half or 2 weeks, I think, on a respirator, but was able to leave, got better, and is now working on getting some things back together again, so they feel better. But another one had lost her brother to suicide, and family of alcoholics, and so was really feeling that, and so meeting with her and just talking about my experience with depression and staying in recovery, and having that within my family as well, was what I could do to help. And fortunately, that person too is now doing much better and taking baby steps to get back into the community. But for her, it was mainly listening some, but also just sharing from my true experience of what it felt like to me, and what I did and what I continue to do to work with feelings of depression and family issues and things like that. And then I think hearing some of that was a type of sharing that made her feel seen and known in a way that sometimes when we're trying to help somebody, we're not able to get across. So so that was just something that did pop up in the chat that I wanted to address, because it's something that we do go through, and I've seen a lot, and I've only been sober almost 14 years, but there have been multiple suicides in my community, and it is difficult, particularly when we are used to sharing our feelings on a certain level, openly, and so there is a sense of closeness, whether it's real or not. We do feel like that, and so I think it does. It feels a little bit personal in some aspects, of should I have done something differently, or would there have been a different outcome? Fortunately, I think I've done enough work that I when these things have happened, I haven't taken it personally. Maybe I should have, but I didn't. I understand that I can't solve everyone's problems in my place in the grand scheme of things. But another comment in there that I really like, Mary's comment on more books on sponsorship would be great. And I think that's true. I mean, I don't know how many are out there. I don't generally go to the local central office and look at books that often, and so I don't know how many are out there. I don't think that there are any secular ones that I know of, and so maybe that's an area that a bunch of us, if you have some time, can put together a secular guide to sponsorship.
I don't know if I've ever seen anything before, and I'm sure that it's happened, where there's been like some sort of a seminar on sponsorship that actually kind of helps train people to teach people about sponsorship, how to be a sponsor, and what a sponsor should and should not do. But that would be some important training to have in AA, so that people knew the limits of a sponsor, and so people would learn about how to sponsor. But yeah, books would be very helpful. The only thing I know that we have is the sponsorship pamphlet, which is actually pretty good when you read it, and it does make it clear that a sponsor isn't supposed to give medical advice and professional advice and all that kind of thing. So and it warns against the real authoritative sponsors, which is the problem.
Yeah, I was going to say, because I think there are some guides to doing it, but unfortunately, they're usually some groups that are not necessarily working in people's best interests. At least in
really
my opinion.
Type sponsorship stuff. But anyway, about empathetic listening, the definition that I found on that website was empathetic listening is a structured listening and questioning technique that allows you to develop and enhance relationships with a stronger understanding of what is being conveyed, both intellectually and emotionally. So as such, it takes listening techniques to a new level. So it says that empathetic listening is a higher level of listening compared to mindful listening or active listening.
Okay.
which kind of makes sense to me because when you're doing, when you're empathetic, you're putting yourself in that person's place.
Right.
You're letting that you're I guess feeling that person's pain. Like they used to say, like certain politicians used to say, "I feel your pain."
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Though you're actually kind of putting yourself, I guess, in their place,
Yeah.
understanding that what they're going through is painful or whatever, confusing or
Right.
whatever the situation might
Yeah,
be.
that was one of the things in the article that I don't know that I necessarily agreed with, of the, saying that empathetic listening doesn't come naturally to many of us.
Hmm.
I think that it does, to at least, to some of us. Maybe I'm an outlier, but yeah, just and I think that's one of the things that people are missing so much about the in-person meetings, is that the unspoken
Yeah.
social cues, and
Yeah.
the way that you can go to a meeting, and
Oh my God, that's
and
huge.
yeah, and have a stressful day, or something's on your mind, and people say, how are you doing, and you're like, I'm fine, and but they can sense that you're not fine. And
Nope,
so
huge.
we'll either see if you talk in the meeting, or get in touch with you after the meeting. But
That's
yeah,
such a
that's,
good
I think,
point.
is a huge part of at least the meeting.
Oh man, you are so right because
Experience.
obviously we there humans communicate in more ways than just by speaking and writing. It's just our body language and the expressions on our face. And I remember, when I would go to meetings when I was really very new, and other times in my sobriety too, when I might be feeling some pain and having some difficulties in my life, and just having a caring expression of another person sitting across the room, and you could see in their eyes that they care, that they're
Mhm.
concerned, and it just provides a sense of comfort. They don't have to say anything. No words were
Right.
necessary. And that was the kind of thing I know that that's what kept me coming back to a large extent, is the vibes I got in the meetings, that, people that weren't actually saying anything to
Mhm.
me or sharing in the meetings, but I could tell they were definitely listening to me, and they were listening to me with a real concern and caring. So,
Mhm.
yeah, that stuff's important. You're so right about that, Angela. And that's why it just blows me away, all the new people that are coming into the program now through Zoom meetings. What
Mhm.
a different experience they're having, you
Yeah,
know?
yeah, definitely. And I know that in some areas they are still doing meetings, in-person meetings. Um, and then, even within my group, some people get together for like one-on-one walks, social distance walks, or, a couple of people for a yard visit, or things like that. So I think some of the new people are getting a little bit of the personal, person to person thing, but at a smaller scale, at least, in our area. But I think that would be definitely difficult to get sober, just in this time period alone, because of the
Yeah,
craziness. But also, yeah, there isn't that physical. But maybe for some people that's also a good thing,
mhm,
because if you're not, if one of the reasons why we're staying away from getting sober, or one of your excuses is that you're afraid of other people, then hey, this is probably a good time to get sober, because you can,
yeah,
check them out from behind your computer screen
I
before you
know, you're
actually
right.
have to
There
be
is
in their
mhm,
presence. So,
I
so
will.
yeah, a little bit for everyone.
Yep,
And I am seeing, the different personalities that are coming in, and the ones that are, this is probably a better way for them, and then
yep,
the ones that it's like, oh, I wish that, that there was a way to be able to be, physically present for other people. Like I said, there's only one person that I've had within recovery that I've really, met one-on-one with during this whole thing. And that's, because she was suicidal. And so that was important. Not that everybody else isn't important, but, this was a very specific case. Um, And in here, like I said, some people are going on walks. I know that some of the people that sponsor that's how they're getting together with people that they sponsor, is going for walks, so that they're, talking and moving and getting a little bit of that without taking too many risks. So
I just Googled Imago Therapy from
Mhm.
Mary's, and it's
Yeah.
Imago. You already know what it is.
Yeah.
What is it?
It's well, like Mary says, it's a therapy about listening and repeating what you heard, and saying things so that your partner feels heard. It's basically comes from Harville and Helen LaKelly Hendricks, and two people who've been in that field for a long time. And the idea behind it is that we tend to get in partnership and or marry a person who has some sort of characteristics that remind us of our attachment, their, injuries or whatever growing up, and that it's not a conscious thing that we do.
Right.
It's the subliminal cues that we get from the person, which is why, it makes me think of when you're younger and hanging out with a group of friends, and then you're like, oh, this person would be so great with this person, and several of your friends are like, yeah, those two just seem like they'd be two peas in the pod, and then those two meet and they have no interest in each other whatsoever. And so learning about Imago Therapy, I'm like, oh, okay, so that could be it. That's why we subconsciously seek out somebody who enacts in some sort of way in your relationship some of the injuries or attachment behaviors that you experienced as a child. And so part of Imago Therapy is to learn to listen and be able to communicate and dialogue so that your partner can help you heal those injuries, so that it's a way to help co-regulate each other, and it's seems very successful for a lot of people.
It's really interesting. It says that the term imago is Latin for image,
Mm-hmm.
so that kind of makes sense.
Yeah.
And then what else does it say here about empathetic listening? To use empathetic listening, listen patiently to what the other person has to say, even if you do not agree with it. It is important to show acceptance, though not necessarily agreement, by simply nodding or injecting phrases such as I understand or I see. Yeah.
Yeah. What I've been, some of the stuff I've been listening to lately has also talked about, being intentional in when you are listening, even if it's something that you don't agree with or somebody that you don't like for whatever reason, but always listening to, assuming that there's something in what they're saying that is helpful, or that you can learn from, or has benefit, and so I think that we talk about that sometimes in the rooms as listen for the similarities rather than the
Yeah.
differences. And so that's how we do some of our active listening is by listening for the similarities. What are the things that we have in common? Usually it's, that we felt ashamed or guilty or whatever for our behavior, and we were disappointed in ourselves because we were not living up to our own expectations of ourselves. Things like that are different things that we've done, people we disappointed. All of those things are stuff that most of us can relate to. Not things like I'm resentful today because my personal airplane is in the shop. When I heard that, I was not I could not relate to that. I didn't know how I was going to make rent the next month.
Right.
Maybe I could, hang out in his plane in the shop. I don't know. But yeah, so the difference was he had a plane, I didn't. But we both had resentment. So there was, a way to be able to do that. So I think AA has been beneficial, at least to me, and I'm sure to other people, in helping us to be able to do that. And so the stuff that I'm hearing about it now is really going into the conversation with that, and I think that that's something that that can be a gender thing as well. So oftentimes, um, there needs to be active listening there, and the assumption that what your partner has to say has merit or has something that that you both should be looking at.
Mm.
And oftentimes, I think I guess it goes with listening in general, that oftentimes when I'm sharing something with my partner, I just want him to hear my experience with
Yeah.
whatever the relationship is or whatever's going on. Or like, my girlfriend got upset with me, and I realized I was being a jerk, and I don't want him to say, well, you need to do this and this and
Exactly.
this. And,
Exactly.
it's like, no, that's not what I need,
Yep.
and he's confused because I'm coming to him with this problem. I'm like, no, I'm coming to share,
Oh yeah.
my
Oh yeah.
feelings, and so it's taken a while for us to work with that,
Yeah. No, I think it is kind of a gender thing. I personally, I could be wrong, but I don't think I have that problem. But I for personally, but I do know that other guys, they have this, and women can have it too. But
oh
you
yeah,
just have this
I
natural
mean,
instinct to want to fix somebody, help. If somebody comes with a problem, then you just feel like it's your obligation to somehow make it better.
yeah,
And sometimes, that's not what you need to do. Sometimes you need, and especially in AA. We
right.
actually had a problem, at one meeting, at a group I went to, where, we had that happen for a little while, where there was a certain person that felt like they had to somehow, fix whatever other people had to, fix the people that had something to say. And it just, oh man, the advice giver, the guy that sits there like he knows everything that everybody else should be doing. It was just kind of crazy. Anyway, it can happen.
Right. Well, and
Anything can
it can
happen
happen
in AA.
accidentally too. I mean, and it also depends on just kind of, where we are at things. So
Yeah.
usually I'm a pretty good, empathetic listener. But a couple of weeks ago, I wasn't. I had my own stuff that was going on,
Mm.
medical things that were on my mind. And when a friend shared something with me, I, responded in a way that that made her feel like I was just basically saying she did this thing wrong, and making an assumption that she had not researched what the thing that she was doing beforehand. And the truth was, when she said that, I'm like, oh wait, yeah, I really did. So I had to recognize that the mindset that I was in when this whole thing happened was that I was in a problem solving mindset, because I had medical and family and all of these things that I needed to be problem solving, because I do need to do that. We have to do that in our lives. And so when, this conversation came up, I was not in my, friend mode. I was in
Yeah.
problem solving mode.
Yeah.
And then acknowledge that, yeah, I really did assume that she had not done research, because my assumption was that she would, talk to me about that because I had a lot of experience in that area, so it was, both, I had to look at ego and, acknowledge the assumption, which I did, and apologized for. And so, yeah, so being a grown up is really hard sometimes. I guess that's the point of my story, is that being a grown up is hard sometimes. I hate adulting,
Yeah, I hear you.
but it's good. It's important, for me to go through those experiences so that I'm reminded about them, and actually practicing the different things that we talk about on here, or that I try to work with the girls on, things like that. Is that, yeah, I still sometimes am not in the right mode at the right time, and I need to be accountable for that, and that it's okay to do that. So.
And one of the bullet points of the empathetic listening that I wrote down here is that you get a sense for the feelings that the speaker is expressing, stay mindful of the emotional content, as well as just the literal meaning of the words. And we were kind of just already talking about that, but
Mhm.
um, yeah, I mean, oh boy, I can see this happening at work too.
Mhm.
I could sit down with an employee and they are, I can tell that they're upset,
Mhm.
and there's some work situation that's going on, and maybe I might not be happy with their work, as their manager, but clearly there's something else that's more something else that's really going on underneath all of that. And maybe I shouldn't really care about that as a manager, but I have noticed at times, especially now during this time,
Mhm.
that people do have a lot going on. They're taking care of their kids while they're trying to work.
Right.
God, all kinds of different issues are going on. So, I'm recognizing that, I guess, more now, just in my workplace, that whenever I talk with my team, I always have time where we just talk about what's going on in our lives,
Mhm.
and that kind of helps get oh, that way you kind of understand what's going on underneath everything else that we're doing. Because otherwise, if
Right.
all I do is focus on whatever the work thing is, it's like, well,
Yeah. And I could see how that would be beneficial for the team because if somebody is, usually like a team player, but
yeah,
really on top of their game and suddenly they're not, then, other people, if they know what's going on, are often willing to pick up the slack a little bit, for that person. And so then you feel more like a cohesive team rather than just, different parts of the cog. And so
yeah.
that's kind of cool.
The place I work, they're very empathetic. They actually push it and encourage it. And it's like if some of our employees are having a problem with like one of their kids or something, that my boss's boss will even let me know, say, hey, if that person needs to take a little bit of time off, and don't they don't even have to charge it to their PTO, just let them, just give them some time, and
Yeah.
that's really good about that. And so when people just know that, and again, this doesn't seem to have to anything to do with recovery, but it's
Mhm.
just nice to work in a supportive place where that people do care and they do listen to you with whatever is was happening. Of course, we still need to get our work done, but still.
Right. Right.
I don't know. I'm coming up with a bunch of stuff that has really nothing to do with recovery. I'm thinking about work. Isn't that weird? And I've been off all week.
Yeah.
I guess I'm ready to go back.
Right. Make sure they're still exist without you. They've made it
Yeah.
a week.
But
Yeah.
you're right, empathy doesn't necessarily come, I guess, naturally. I think I'm like you. I think of myself as being an empathetic person, but I know there are times when I'm not.
Mm.
But I think that I do have it within me to be empathetic. But there are some people, and I'm not going to mention any names, but
Right.
they have no empathy at all. And it's like really weird to witness something like that. And it's like, if you don't even have that little spark, I don't know, man. I what can be done about that? But I think most people have it within us to, because we've had our own life experiences, that we know how painful it was, that we act, we do care about other people that are going through something like that. We do have that sense of empathy.
Yeah.
Uh,
Well, and for people who don't, I mean, I know for a lot of guys in our meetings that they had to shut that part of them off for
mm,
whatever reason, and so it's not that they don't have it within them; they just don't know how to do it. And so,
right.
yeah, I do think that it can be something that can be learned. And I often advocate for the book Nonviolent Communication, Language of Life. Because that has some guides, some dialogue, things that you can use so you can get used to phrasing things in a certain way to make it more open for dialogue rather than this is how I feel this and this
Right.
and it comes out somewhat harsh. So yeah, so there are things the Imago Therapy has stuff like that. There are a lot of different ways you can learn it, I think it can be learned, in that sometimes it's that the culture that you're in, that wasn't allowed or it wasn't safe. And so to learn, to start building some trust and the ability to do that, I think that can happen.
Yep.
Because with some people, they just weren't taught or weren't in an environment where they needed to use empathy and then there's some of us who had to rely heavily on being able to feel the situation around us to know how to act in order to survive. So there's some balancing that needs to happen in recovery regarding, listening, empathetic listening, and boundaries, and all of that fun stuff.
Aaron's comment is a pretty good place to end up, I think. He
Oh
says,
yeah.
I'd never tell a newcomer to put a plug in the jug or take the cotton out of my ears and put it in my mouth. I've had that experience as a newcomer and felt very alienated. I needed to talk. Boy, is that not the truth.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
And because, like we said at the beginning of this podcast, that is what I found the most helpful for me personally, was talking and being heard, you know?
Yeah. In our meetings, we usually really, at least, in person, we've done it online too, but that was something we talked about in business meetings before, actually,
Yeah.
was that, to encourage, people who are new to share, not forcing them, but that it was something that our group really wanted to make sure we were doing, was encouraging them to share. What I found is that in some people who have been in AA for a while, that if that's the way that they, were initially brought in, that they still talk in those terms, not necessarily that they think that other people should do that, but they say that part of their story is that they really did need to shut up and just listen or whatever. And so that's been interesting to me to start picking up on that. And I've only been hearing that lately as I've been communicating or been in meetings with people from all around the world, that's something that some people, and the person I'm thinking of right now is a woman, and so it's something that she internalized from the type of AA that she got sober in, that was part of her story. And so, so I know that our group actively tries to avoid that, and let people know that we really want to hear what they have to say, because it helps us in our recovery. So
it really does. I totally agree with that. That's the most important. They always say the most important person in the room. I don't know about that, but I think
some
I'm the
people
most
argue
important.
about that, but I do think it's important because,
It is.
for me, it reminds me, or it lets me know that nothing's really changed out there in the world of alcoholism. If I choose to drink again, there's not going to be anything different. And I think it helps for those people to know that they're contributing, that they have, it's the service that they're giving. So it gives them a sense of purpose in their sobriety, not only just for them to get sober, but that, that they're able to be helpful to us as well.
Yeah. Well, we've come up on an hour. Thank you, Angela. This has been a great conversation. And thank you, everybody, for participating in Facebook and YouTube. It looks like the Facebook comments did come through. So apparently that was working. I'm glad. And this turned out to be a really nice episode. I enjoyed it a lot. I learned a lot, and I'm glad that we did this topic. So we'll be back again next Friday for another live stream, and I look forward to it. And Angela, you have a nice rest of the weekend.
Don't tell me what to do, but
I won't tell you what to do. That's right. Okay, I'm sorry.
You can't boss me.
I hope you have.
But I usually say, have a great day if you feel like it.
And the rest of you the same. Take care, everyone.
Bye-bye.